With characters like Garling and Ethan now in the running too, what do you think Zoro has to do to get the title of World's Strongest Swordsman? It's a good question because after looking through a lot of stuff in the series, I think I clearly know what it is that Zoro is lacking that all these other people do have. And to understand that, we got to go all the way back to Alabasta, because it was during his fight with Mr. One where he started to learn what the breadth of all things was. He was able to hear the breathing of his steel and able to cut whatever it is he wanted to cut and not cut whatever it is he didn't want to. So even though his sword is super sharp and this would clearly cut this tree branch off, he swings his sword into these leaves and nothing gets cut because he didn't want to. But then we see Zoro lightly tap this rock with his sword that he did want to cut, and then the whole thing split in half. And the majority of us recognize this as like Zoro beginning to understand what haki is. But I think this moment was also to like showcase this is what you need to master to be the world's greatest swordsman. Because everybody else on this list, aside from maybe Fujitora, because we haven't really seen him go all out yet, is capable of like cutting anything in their path whenever they throw out a sword slash with the intent to cut something. Let me give you some examples. So remember when Law was fighting Virgo and he was getting beat at first, but then once he got his heart back, he was able to clean this fight up with one sword swing. And I know Law's a bit of an outlier because he uses his devil fruit a lot with his sword techniques, but still, this feat kind of showcases what I'm talking about. Because with this slash, he did mean to take out Virgo, but the slash was so strong, it also took out the entirety of the mountain range in Punk Hazard. So basically, when Law had the intent to cut something, everything in the range of that sword slash got split in two. Another example, let's use Mihawk at Marineford. We see him fighting everybody, and then at the point in the war where he starts fighting Luffy with like the intent to actually kill him, should fate allow Luffy to die, he swung his sword with the intent to kill him, and even though Luffy dodged, everything behind him got split in two because that sword slash was meant to cut anything it hit. And it didn't matter how far away this frozen tsunami was, it got split cleanly in two. In a similar way, when you look at S-Hawk, he fought against Blackbeard through a sword slash trying to cut Blackbeard and ended up cutting the mountain in half behind him. And for the example with Ethan, there will be manga spoilers, so keep that in mind. We saw Ethan aiming at Bonnie, and even though Frankie was able to save her, that sword slash went on and cut the head off one of the Elbaf ships. These things are massive, by the way, so this is not a small feat. And then shortly after that, he just galloped into the air and then cut the entire Labostratum in half. And when it comes to the Labostratum, it is almost as wide as the entire island of Egghead. So as you can see with a lot of these characters, the running trend is when they swing their sword with the intent to kill whoever is in front of them, whatever's behind that person suffers the consequences too. Now, let's look at what Zoro has done that's similar to what these guys have done. Because I think the best showcase for Zoro that mimics everybody else's feats that I just showed you is his fight against Pika. For all intents and purposes, Pika made himself like half or like a quarter the size of this entire country, and Zoro cut him in two. However, unlike everybody else in this list that accomplished their feat on their own and very easily, Zoro had to do this with help. Because if it wasn't for Orlumbus throwing him to get in range in the first place, he wouldn't have been able to do this to Pika. And this is a point against Zoro, because if he was a better swordsman, he'd have cut Pika in half from where he was standing. Because how far away do you think this iceberg was that Mihawk cut in half when he was aiming at Luffy? It was at the coast of the island Marineford, and that got split in two. For Law's sword slash to expand over the entire mountain range, he had to like cover that whole distance. If you replace Zoro with either of those characters, from where they are, they would have cut Pika in half no problem. Zoro still needs the assistance to get that range though. And even though Zoro cutting the meteor in half in Stampede isn't canon, considering we saw a Law and Doffy do it back on Dressrosa, I think Zoro way after this point can definitely do it too. But keep in mind, even in this movie, he couldn't clear the whole meteor by himself. After he split it in half, it was still like very close together, still gonna cause the same amount of damage, just more. And then Mihawk had to come in and obliterate the entire thing without even having to jump up at it. He was standing on the ground. So to answer your question, the thing I think Zoro needs to do in order to get the title of World's Greatest Swordsman, or at least be a contender in like the top 3 category, is that he needs to have this same level of like precision with cutting anything from anywhere the same way Mihawk does it, Ethan does it, Mihawk Jr., and how Law does it. And despite how strong Zoro is, we have not seen him do this feat just yet. Now, if you want, you can say he got kind of close at Wano where he was fighting Kaido, because he definitely threw that sword slash that even though it missed Kaido, it went on and cut off this giant horn in the distance. But the difference is, look at Zoro down here wheezing. Doing a feat that is close to all the other people that I said on this list made him wheeze and like lose a lot of energy. This is still not something he can do easily yet. But if he wants to be the world's greatest swordsman, anything in your path that you do not want together anymore should be getting split in two whenever you swing your sword with intent. And all these other people do it effortlessly. They're not panting, they're not wheezing afterward. They don't need help from other people to close the gap because they're not mobile enough. If Zoro was a better swordsman at this point, the sword slash would have just went the distance and took Pika out. And I know it's weird to have Fujitora on the list, but we know that he's really strong. He's just a good guy, so we'll never see him do like some of these insane feats. At least not yet in the story. But I'll still put him up here for the same reason why you can still put Goku in the category of like a planet buster, even though he's never destroyed a planet. It's just that he's such a good guy, destroying a planet is something he will never do. So technically speaking, Goku has not destroyed a planet. That's not a feat he can say he can do. Did almost destroy the universe though just by throwing a punch. So in that same way, I think Fujitora has feats that he can do that is like similar to everybody else I just named on this list. It's just he's a good guy, so why would I do that? But all in all, I think you understand the point that I'm getting at now. The thing that I think Zoro needs to do so that he can get the title of world's greatest swordsman is not only accomplish the same type of sword skill and precision that Mihawk and all these other people were able to do from a distance, but he needs to do what they just did even better, cover way more range with way more precision, or on the flip side, if he's able to like cut somebody down like Blackbeard without doing all the collateral because that's just how good he is. In either case, I can see him accomplishing that feat being the thing that like puts him as a contender for world's greatest swordsman finally. When it comes down to swordsmanship between Saint Figurlin, Garling, and Mihawk, I think he has the potential to be a better swordsman than Mihawk is. And I know Mihawk's the world's greatest swordsman, but let me see if I can explain at least my line of logic as to why I think this. And of course, the first thing we gotta talk about is the fact that these two dudes ain't got no feats. I mean, Mihawk has some stuff that we've seen back in Marine for, but we really haven't seen him pushing the limit yet. And of course, we ain't seen Garling do anything yet either. And I know the first thing people are going to talk about is the fact that Mihawk is the world's greatest swordsman, so by definition, he should be better than Garling. But to that I say, you gotta remember that the Holy Knights are like the Celestial Dragon's personal guard. And considering that Dragon said the real fight starts when these dudes come out, I'm willing to bet that they are Mary Jo's last line of defense, not the Admirals. And while I could see an argument for the Admirals being stronger than the Holy Knights, I don't think any of the Admirals other than maybe Akainu could be stronger than Garland. Because this dude is the supreme commander of the God's Knights. Not only that, because of his name Figurlin, we know that this dude is related to Shanks. Because back in the movie One Piece film Red, when we saw the Gorosei contemplating killing Uta, we see Ethan say, even if this girl is of Figurlin blood, keep in mind at this point in the movie, all we knew was that she was Shanks' daughter. So they are assuming she has the same blood that Shanks has, because Shanks has Figurlin blood. So of course Saint Figurlin Garling has to be his father. I mean, look at this. This is literally the splitting image of Shanks when he is younger. He ain't beating them allegations. And then when it comes to Shanks and Mihawk, you gotta remember that these two were on equal footing for a very long time. Their duels were heard all throughout the New World whenever they clashed, and I guess they were clashing for the title of World's Greatest Swordsman before Shanks lost his arm. And if Shanks with two of his arms was as skilled as Mihawk to go blow for blow with him, then I don't think it's impossible that someone like his father would be, a greater swordsman than that of Shanks, and he might be a better swordsman than Mihawk. Now you could make an argument that Mihawk is still greater because, with Garling's age, he clearly wouldn't be in the same skill bracket as Mihawk. With characters like Rayleigh, Whitebeard, Guard, we've seen old dudes lose their power once they got older, and Garling could be in that category. But the issue comes in is if he's not. Don't forget, we saw characters like Big Mom that can get strong in old age, even though she's 68 years old. And then with her ability, she could get even stronger than that. And while it's not confirmed if Garling could, still be in his prime or out of his prime, or if he even has a devil fruit, you can't ignore the fact that him being not only a Celestial Dragon, but a high-ranking member of the Celestial Dragons, means that he probably got some crazy, insider knowledge from the world government. For all we know, this could be one of the best swords in the entire world that's even better than Yoru. For all we know, like the Gorosei, they could have done some weird experiment on him to make him have some devilish devil fruit or have a crazy healing factor. And on top of that, even if he's older, he's basically the closest thing we have to Shanks with two hands. Only since he's his father, he may be way more skilled in swordsmanship. Maybe Shanks just has greater hockey because he's fighting for a higher purpose. So all in all, I'm not necessarily saying that he is stronger than Mihawk. I'm just saying that if there was a swordsman in the history of One Piece that could be better than him, it would be Saint Figurlin Garling. I feel you on seeing Mihawk cut a planet, but this made me think about something when it comes to Zoro. So we've already seen characters in One Piece like cut meteors in half, cut mountain ranges in half, cut tsunamis in half, and yes, this iceberg was the frozen tsunami. And even though Zoro cut a meteor in half in Film Red, it wasn't like him doing it in canon. So what could Zoro like cut in half in the main series that would like showcase that he's better than everybody else when he becomes the world's greatest swordsman? And I'm not gonna front, I think it would make a lot of sense if we saw him cut the red line in half. And I don't mean like the whole thing, but like if they were like maybe somebody like Ryuma in the past made this X right here. How else would an X marks the spot just end up geographically on this supercontinent? So maybe I could see a situation where we need to get to Lavtail and it's on the other side of the red line, or maybe inside the red line. And the red line is massive. Like we've never really like seen the entire climb to the top. We just kind of cut to getting up there because you have to go through the clouds to get that high. So like dealing with the red line would always be this like really big daunting task. But when it comes to Luffy being an emperor and Zoro finally being the world's greatest swordsman, I can see us having to get through here, and while everybody else is panicking, Luffy looks over to Zoro and he simply is like, "Hey Zoro, cut that, it's in the way." And Zoro just goes, "All right, got it." Just like he did that sea train on the way to Enies Lobby, we'll just see Zoro like split another end into the red line. And for all we know, Zoro could like do it on the back end. Cause you see like there's the entrance way. What if Zoro's the one that makes the exit on the red line? That way they can return right back home and they don't gotta do nothing crazy to get there. And I can't front with you. If Zoro was able to pull off something like that, he is definitely the world's greatest swordsman. Cause at that point, Mihawk would legitimately have to cut the world in half to be better than Zoro.